The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I was already awake, nursing my second cup of coffee and watching the early light filter through my apartment in Coral Gables. The number on my phone showed my sister's name, Vanessa. We hadn't spoken in 3 weeks, not since our last tense visit to see Dad at his recovery suite. Her voice had that false solemnity that immediately put me on edge. "Olivia," she said, cutting straight through any pleasantries, "I have some difficult news. Dad passed away last night, peacefully in his sleep." I set down my coffee mug, my hand suddenly unsteady. "What? When? I was planning to visit him today." "The arrangements are already made," she continued, her tone shifting, becoming almost businesslike. "I've handled everything. Oh, and Olivia, about Dad's estate. The will is very clear. Everything goes to me. The penthouse, the investments, all of it. You get nothing." There was a pause, just long enough for me to hear breathing that wasn't hers. Someone else was there, close enough to be listening. "Don't even think about contesting it," she added. Then she hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at the phone in disbelief. My father, dead, just like that. And Vanessa's first priority wasn't grief, wasn't even a pretense of sympathy. It was a threat wrapped in legal language, delivered with the kind of confidence that comes from rehearsal. Something was very, very wrong. Let me back up. My name is Olivia Carson. I'm 42 years old, a former financial analyst who spent 15 years in corporate risk management before I burned out and shifted to consulting work. My marriage ended 2 years ago. No drama, just two people who grew apart. I threw myself into work after that, and, admittedly, I let some family connections slip, including the one with my father. My sister Vanessa is 3 years younger, 39. We were close as kids, but as adults, we drifted into different orbits. She married young, to a guy named Derek, charming on the surface, but always chasing the next big break. Real estate ventures that went sideways, crypto investments that crashed, a consulting business that never quite took off. Vanessa worked as a pharmaceutical sales rep to keep them afloat, but the cracks were showing. I'd heard whispers at family gatherings about money problems, about Derek pressuring her to, quote, think bigger. Our father, Richard Carson, was 78 and had been sharp, healthy, and fiercely independent his entire life. A retired hedge fund manager, he lived in a luxury penthouse in Brickell, floor-to-ceiling windows, private elevator, the kind of place where the lobby smells like money and discretion. He played tennis twice a week, attended art galas, and could still beat anyone at chess. That's why what happened 9 months ago didn't make sense. Vanessa convinced Dad she should become his power of attorney. Just to help with bills and medical appointments, she'd said. You know how complicated insurance can be at his age. Dad hesitated, but Vanessa was persistent, and she was his daughter. He signed. Within weeks, everything changed. Dad had a minor stroke, or that's what Vanessa told everyone. She moved him into a private recovery facility in Coral Gables, one of those concierge medical suites where privacy is the main selling point. He needs round-the-clock monitoring, she'd insisted. He can't live alone anymore. When I visited, I was shocked. My vibrant, sharp father sat in a chair by the window, staring vacantly. He didn't recognize me. He couldn't speak, just made weak sounds, his mouth working like he was trying to form words that wouldn't come. Is this really possible? I'd asked his doctor, a calm man named Dr. Raymond. He was fine 3 months ago. Stroke recovery can be unpredictable, he'd said smoothly. Some patients experience significant cognitive and speech impairment. We're monitoring his progress closely. But it didn't sit right. I visited anyway, 3 times a week. Even when Dad didn't know who I was, I'd sit with him, hold his hand, tell him about my day. Vanessa visited too, but always in a rush, always checking her phone, always with that new edge in her voice. Now, standing in my kitchen with her words still ringing in my ears, I realized what I'd been too blind to see. This wasn't grief talking. This was greed. And that exhale I'd heard in the background, that was Derek. Before we get into what I did next, comment where you're watching from. And if you love family revenge stories where the truth hits hard, hit like and subscribe right now, because this one is about to get ugly. I didn't call Vanessa back. I didn't argue. I did something better. I verified. First, I called the Coral Gables recovery facility where Dad was supposedly staying. My hands were shaking as I dialed, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. A receptionist answered on the third ring. "Hi, I'm calling about my father, Richard Carson," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I just heard some concerning news and I wanted to confirm his status." There was a pause. Keyboard clicks. Then, "Mr. Carson is currently resting comfortably in his suite. Would you like me to connect you to his care team?" My heart started pounding. "Wait, he's alive? He's there right now?" "Yes, ma'am. Is there some confusion?" I sat down heavily. No confusion." "Thank you." I hung up and immediately called my ex-husband's sister, who's a lawyer. She didn't pick up. I left a voicemail, then started searching online for elder abuse attorneys in Miami. My father wasn't dead. Vanessa had lied, which meant everything else she'd said, about the will, about the estate, about me getting nothing, was part of a bigger con. I drove to the facility that afternoon. It was one of those places that doesn't look like a hospital, more like a luxury hotel with medical staff. Marble floors, soft lighting, art on the walls. I walked up to the front desk and asked to see my father. The receptionist checked her computer, then gave me an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, Miss Carson, but your father's visitation list is currently restricted. Only approved visitors are allowed." "Restricted by who?" "His power of attorney, your sister, Vanessa Carson Hughes." My jaw tightened. "I'm his daughter." "I understand, but the restrictions are in place for his recovery and privacy. If you'd like to be added to the list, you'll need to speak with Ms. Carson Hughes directly." I wanted to argue, to demand access, but I knew it would get me nowhere. Instead, I asked if I could at least confirm he was okay. The receptionist hesitated, then softened. "He's stable. He's receiving excellent care. I can tell the nursing staff you stopped by." I thanked her and left, my mind racing. Vanessa had locked me out. She controlled access, information, everything. That's when I realized how deep this went. Isolation and control of access are classic warning signs in financial elder abuse cases. Back in my car, I sat in the parking lot and made a list. If Vanessa was lying about Dad being dead, what else was she lying about? I pulled up property records online and searched for Dad's penthouse. The listing was still in his name, but when I dug deeper, I found something that made my blood run cold. A sale was pending. Closing date, 72 hours from now. The property was worth $4.2 million. The buyer was an LLC I didn't recognize. And the seller's representative? Vanessa Carson Hughes, acting under power of attorney. She wasn't just lying about Dad being dead. She was selling his home while he was still alive and unable to speak. I called the listing agent, pretending to be a potential buyer interested in similar properties. She was chatty, eager. "Oh, that penthouse is stunning," she said. "Private elevator, wraparound terrace, completely renovated. It's going to close fast. The seller is very motivated." Motivated how? Let's just say they want a clean, quick transaction. No complications. No complications. Because Dad couldn't object. Because no one else knew. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking with anger now, not fear. That evening, I sat in my apartment and pieced together what I knew. Dad was alive, but isolated. Vanessa controlled his medical care, his finances, his property. She'd blocked my access and was rushing a multi-million-dollar sale before anyone could interfere. And Derek was in on it. That background breathing during the call wasn't accidental. He was coaching her. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? My sister lied about our father's death? They'd tell me it was a family dispute. I needed proof. I needed leverage. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight Vanessa head on. I was going to let her think she'd won, and then I was going to set a trap she'd walk right into. Elder financial exploitation often involves rushed transactions and misuse of legal authority like power of attorney. I picked up my phone and started making calls. First, to a real estate attorney who specialized in fraud cases. Then, to a private investigator I'd worked with during my risk management days. And finally, to my Aunt Linda, Dad's older sister, the one person in the family who'd always seen through Vanessa's act. Because if Vanessa wanted to play this game, I was going to make sure she lost everything. The real estate attorney's name was Marcus Chen, and he didn't waste time with pleasantries. When I walked into his office in downtown Miami the next morning, he was already reviewing the documents I'd emailed him the night before. "Your sister is moving fast," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "A 72-hour closing on a $4.2 million property is aggressive. It suggests urgency or desperation." "Can we stop it?" I asked. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression measured. "Possibly, but we need to establish that your father lacks capacity to consent to the sale, or that your sister is acting outside the scope of her authority as power of attorney. Neither is easy to prove on short notice." "He can't speak," I said. "He's been like that for months. How could he possibly consent to selling his home?" "That's the question we need to raise with the title company. In Florida, they're responsible for ensuring the transaction is legitimate. If we can flag this as a potential case of elder exploitation, they'll be legally obligated to investigate before proceeding." "How do we do that?" Marcus pulled out a legal pad. "We file a formal objection with the title company and copy the buyer's attorney. We'll cite concerns about undue influence, lack of capacity, and possible financial exploitation. It won't stop the closing outright, but it will force everyone to pause and ask questions." Undue influence. The term hung in the air between us. It was exactly what this was. Vanessa isolating Dad, controlling his medical care, rushing decisions while he couldn't defend himself. "There's something else," I said. "I think they're medicating him, keeping him sedated so he can't communicate." Marcus's expression darkened. "That would be chemical restraint, a form of elder abuse. If you can prove it, this becomes criminal, not just civil." "I need to see him first. I need to know if he's aware, if he understands what's happening." "Then get access," Marcus said, "however you can. Record everything. Florida requires all parties to consent to recording, but if you're in the room and disclose it, you're covered. Document his condition, his medications, any signs of oversedation. We'll need it." I left his office with a plan, but also with a knot in my stomach. This wasn't just about stopping a fraudulent sale anymore. This was about saving my father from people who saw him as an obstacle to money. That afternoon, I met with Aunt Linda at a cafe in Coconut Grove. She was in her early 80s, sharp as ever, with a kind of no-nonsense energy that made people listen. "Vanessa's always been greedy," Linda said bluntly, stirring her coffee. "But this is beyond greed. This is evil." I need you at the closing, I said. As a witness, as family who'll publicly question what's happening. Linda didn't hesitate. I'll be there, and I'll make sure everyone in that room knows Richard would never agree to this. There's one more thing, I said carefully. Derek, Vanessa's husband. I think he's the one pushing this. He's been in financial trouble for years, and now suddenly they're selling a $4 million penthouse? Linda nodded slowly. Derek's a leech. He always has been. But Vanessa, she made the choice to go along with it. Don't let her hide behind him when this falls apart. That evening, I drove to the facility again. This time, I didn't ask permission. I waited in the parking lot until I saw a nurse I recognized, a kind woman named Angela, who'd always been gentle with Dad during my visits. I caught her on her break. Angela, I need your help. She looked nervous immediately. Miss Carson, I can't. My sister told me my father died, I said, cutting through the fear. But he's alive, and she's selling his home while he can't speak. I think something's wrong with his medication. Angela's face went pale. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. I shouldn't be telling you this, but his chart changed about 6 months ago. New medications, sedatives, antipsychotics, things he didn't need before. Who authorized the changes? His power of attorney, your sister. My chest tightened. Is he being kept sedated on purpose? Angela hesitated, then nodded slightly. I can't prove it, but he's always drowsiest right after she visits. And she's very controlling about his medication schedule. She brings in updated prescriptions herself. Chemical restraint used to keep elderly individuals compliant often involves unnecessary sedatives or antipsychotics. Can you help me see him? Just for a few minutes? Angela looked torn, but finally she nodded. Tomorrow morning, early, before the shift change, but you can't tell anyone I let you in. I thanked her and left, my mind racing. Tomorrow I'd see my father, and I'd find out if he was still in there, still fighting, still aware. Because if he was, we had a chance. The next morning, I arrived at the facility at 6:15 a.m., just as the sky was turning pink over Biscayne Bay. Angela met me at a side entrance, her face tense. 10 minutes, she whispered. That's all I can give you. She led me down a quiet hallway to Dad's suite. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, I could see him, sitting in a chair by the window, his head tilted to one side, eyes half closed. I stepped inside, and Angela closed the door softly behind me. Dad, I said quietly, pulling a chair close to his. It's me. It's Olivia. He didn't move at first. But then, slowly, his eyes shifted toward me. There was something there, a flicker of recognition, or maybe just awareness. It was hard to tell. I reached out and took his hand. It was warm, but limp. Dad, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand. Nothing. I tried again, my voice breaking slightly. Dad, please. I need to know you're in there. For a long moment, there was nothing. And then, so faint, I almost missed it. I felt it, a small squeeze, weak, barely there, but real. Tears blurred my vision. You're still here, I whispered. You're still fighting. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table, recording. Dad, I'm going to ask you some questions. If the answer is yes, squeeze my hand. If it's no, don't squeeze. Okay? Another faint squeeze. Do you know who I am? Squeeze. Did you agree to sell your penthouse? Nothing. Did Vanessa tell you what she's doing? Nothing. Do you trust her? Nothing. But this time, his eyes, those tired, clouded eyes, met mine with something that looked like fear. I leaned closer. I'm going to stop this, Dad. I'm going to protect you. I promise. One more squeeze. Stronger this time. When Angela signaled that time was up, I left the room with my heart pounding and my phone full of evidence. It wasn't much, just a fragile old man squeezing his daughter's hand, but it was proof. Proof that he was aware, proof that he hadn't consented. Proof that someone was stealing his life while he was trapped inside his own body. Later that morning, I met with Aunt Linda and Marcus Chen at his office. I showed them the recording. Marcus watched it twice, his expression grave. This is powerful. It won't hold up as a signed affidavit, but it establishes awareness and non-consent. Combined with the medication concerns and the rushed sale, we have grounds to file an emergency motion. What kind of motion? I asked. A temporary restraining order to halt the closing and freeze your father's assets pending a full investigation. We'll argue financial exploitation, chemical restraint, and undue influence. Will it work? It'll buy us time. And time is what your sister doesn't have. Aunt Linda leaned forward. What about Vanessa? What's she going to do when she finds out? She's going to fight, I said, and she's going to try to shut me out completely. Let her try, Linda said fiercely. I've known that girl since she was born. She's not getting away with this. That afternoon, Marcus filed the motion. Within hours, Vanessa called me. What the hell do you think you're doing? She hissed, her voice shaking with rage. Protecting Dad, I said calmly. You're destroying everything. That sale is legitimate. I have power of attorney. I have every legal right. You lied about him being dead, Vanessa? Silence. You told me he died. You tried to sell his home before I could find out the truth. So no, you don't get to talk to me about legal rights. You don't understand, she said, her voice cracking now. We need this. Derek and I, we're drowning, Olivia. We're losing everything. So you decided to take Dad's everything instead? He doesn't even know what's happening, she shouted. He can't speak. He can't think. What difference does it make? And there it was, the ugly truth, finally out in the open. It makes all the difference, I said quietly, because he's still a person, Vanessa, and you don't get to erase him just because it's convenient. She hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone, and realized something had shifted. This wasn't just about stopping a sale anymore. This was about choosing a side. And I'd chosen Dad. Even if it meant losing my sister forever. Even if it meant she'd fight me with everything she had. Because some things, like a father's dignity, like his life, were worth protecting, no matter the cost. Financial elder abuse often involves family members exploiting legal authority and isolation to misappropriate assets. The restraining order bought us 48 hours. Not much, but enough to build a case. Marcus warned me that Vanessa would come back hard. She'd argue that I was interfering with legitimate estate management, that Dad had signed the POA willingly, that everything was legal. We need more than a hand squeeze, Marcus said during our strategy session. We need a pattern, documentation, evidence that this isn't just a disagreement between siblings, but systematic exploitation. That's when I hired the private investigator. Her name was Sandra Reyes, and she came highly recommended. I'd worked with her years ago during a corporate fraud case, and she had a reputation for being thorough and discreet. What am I looking for? Sandra asked when we met at a coffee shop in Brickell. Financial transfers, I said. Any unusual activity in my father's accounts over the past 9 months. Anything that coincides with Vanessa getting power of attorney. You think she's been taking money? I think she's been planning this for a while. The penthouse sale isn't the first move. It's the final one. Sandra nodded, making notes. I'll need account numbers, bank names, anything you have. And I'll pull property records, see if there have been other attempted transactions. I gave her everything I could access. It wasn't much, I'd been shut out of Dad's affairs long before Vanessa made her move, but it was a start. "What about the boyfriend?" Sandra asked. "Derek. You said he's involved?" "He has to be. Vanessa doesn't operate like this on her own. He's the one with money problems. He's the one who's always pushing her to think bigger." Then we look at him too. Financial records, business filings, any debts or liens. If they're desperate enough to do this, there'll be a trail. White-collar fraud cases often rely heavily on documentary evidence, like financial records and transaction histories, to establish intent and pattern. Over the next 36 hours, Sandra worked fast. She pulled bank records, legally, through subpoenas Marcus filed as part of the emergency motion, and what she found was damning. In the 9 months since Vanessa had become Dad's power of attorney, over $340,000 had been transferred out of his accounts. Small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, but growing larger over time. The transfers went to accounts in Vanessa's name, or to pay off credit cards and loans tied to Derek. "They've been bleeding him dry," Sandra said when she showed me the records, "and they've been careful about it. Small enough not to trigger automatic fraud alerts, but consistent enough to add up." "How is this legal?" I asked, my voice tight with anger. "It's not," Marcus said. "A power of attorney is supposed to act in the principal's best interest. This is self-dealing. This is theft." But the most damaging piece of evidence came from an unexpected source: Derek himself. Sandra had been monitoring Derek's social media and found a private Instagram account he used to brag to friends. In one post from 3 weeks ago, he'd written, "Big payday coming soon, finally getting what we deserve." The comments underneath were telling. "About time, man. You guys have been struggling. What's the deal? New business?" Derek's reply: "Family business. Let's just say some people don't need what they have anymore." I stared at the screenshot, my stomach turning. He was talking about my father like he was already gone. Like his life, his home, his money, his existence was just an inconvenience standing between Derek and a payday. "This is evidence of intent," Marcus said. "Combined with the financial records and your father's testimony, limited as it is, we can make a case for financial exploitation and undue influence." "What about the medication?" I asked. "Angela said Vanessa's been controlling his prescriptions." "We'll need medical records for that. I've subpoenaed them, but facilities like this are protective of patient privacy. It could take time." "We don't have time," I said. "The closing is in less than 24 hours. Marcus looked at me seriously. "Then we go to the closing. We show up, we present our objections in person, and we make it impossible for the title company to proceed without liability." "What if Vanessa shows up?" "She will," Marcus said, "and that's exactly what we want. Because the more she talks, the more she'll incriminate herself." That night, I sat in my apartment and went over everything one more time. The financial records, the social media posts, the recording of Dad squeezing my hand. It wasn't perfect, but it was a pattern. A clear, documented pattern of two people exploiting a vulnerable man for money. I thought about calling Vanessa one more time, giving her a chance to back out. But I knew it wouldn't matter. She'd made her choice. She'd chosen greed over family. And now she was going to face the consequences. I packed the documents into a folder, set my alarm for early morning, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow, we'd walk into that closing. And tomorrow, everything would come to light. Financial elder abuse cases often involve sudden large transactions, combined with isolation and control of the victim. The closing was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the offices of Coastal Title Group in Brickell. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place where every surface gleamed and every voice echoed with the weight of money. I arrived early with Marcus and Aunt Linda. We took the elevator to the 12th floor and checked in with reception. The waiting area was pristine. Leather chairs, abstract art, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. "Remember," Marcus said quietly, "let me do the talking. Your job is to stay calm and let her react." Aunt Linda squeezed my hand. "We've got this, sweetheart." At 9:55, Vanessa arrived. She was dressed like she was going to a business gala. Tailored navy suit, expensive heels, hair blown out perfectly. Derek walked in beside her, wearing a suit that looked new, like he'd bought it specifically for this occasion. He carried himself with the kind of swagger that only comes from thinking you've already won. Vanessa's face went rigid when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice low but sharp. "Same thing you are," I said evenly, "representing my father's interests." "You have no right." "Miss Carson Hughes," Marcus interrupted smoothly, stepping forward. "I'm Marcus Chen, Ms. Olivia Carson's attorney. We're here to raise formal objections to this transaction on behalf of Richard Carson." The title company's closer, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, came out to greet us, looking visibly uncomfortable. "I was informed there might be some complications. Perhaps we should all step into the conference room." The buyer was already there, a man in his early 50s with a cold, calculating air and an attorney who looked like he billed by the minute. They both stiffened when they saw the size of our group. We all sat down around a long glass table. The city stretched out behind us, bright and indifferent. Patricia cleared her throat. "Before we proceed, I've been made aware of an objection filed by Ms. Olivia Carson regarding this transaction. Mr. Chen, would you like to present your concerns?" Marcus opened his folder. "We're objecting on the grounds of financial exploitation, lack of capacity, and undue influence. Richard Carson is currently unable to communicate verbally and has been under the care of his daughter, Ms. Vanessa Carson Hughes, who holds power of attorney. We have evidence suggesting that this sale was initiated without his informed consent and as part of a pattern of financial abuse." Vanessa's face flushed red. "This is absurd. I have full legal authority." "Authority that's being misused," Marcus said calmly. He slid a document across the table. "These are bank records showing over $340,000 transferred from Mr. Carson's accounts to accounts controlled by Ms. Carson Hughes and her husband over the past 9 months. Transfers that coincide with Mr. Carson's sudden decline and isolation." The buyer's attorney leaned forward, scanning the document. His expression darkened. "This is a family dispute," Derek said suddenly, his voice tight. "You're making it sound like a crime." "Because it is a crime," Aunt Linda said sharply. "Richard would never agree to this. He's trapped in that facility, and you two are robbing him blind." "Mrs. Harrison," Patricia said carefully, "I appreciate your concern, but—" "He can't even speak," I said, my voice louder than I intended. "How could he possibly consent to selling his home?" Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "He doesn't need to speak. I'm his power of attorney. I make decisions for him. That's how this works." "Not when those decisions benefit you instead of him," Marcus said. The room went silent. Then Vanessa made her mistake. "He can't speak anyway. What's he gonna do?" she snapped, her voice raw with frustration. "Sit there and stare at walls for the rest of his life? He doesn't even know what's happening. This money? We need it. We're drowning, and he's just sitting there, wasting it." The words hung in the air like poison. The buyer's attorney closed his folder. "We're done here." Patricia looked stricken. "I'm sorry, but in light of these allegations, Coastal Title cannot proceed with this closing. We'll need to conduct a full investigation before any transfer can occur." Title companies are required to ensure transactions are legitimate and can be held liable for facilitating fraud. No, Vanessa said, her voice shaking. No, you can't. This is legal. I have the right. You have the right to hire your own attorney, the buyer's lawyer said coldly, standing. Because my client isn't touching this property until it's cleared. Derek grabbed Vanessa's arm. We need to go, now. If you felt your stomach drop right there, subscribe, because the next few minutes are where everything flips, and she doesn't see it coming. Vanessa looked at me, her face twisted with rage and desperation. Then she turned and walked out, Derek pulling her toward the elevators. But I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Financial exploitation often involves rushed transactions and assertions of unchecked authority. I should have felt relieved. The closing had collapsed. The penthouse was safe. But as I watched Vanessa and Derek disappear into the elevator, all I felt was dread. She's going to retaliate, I said to Marcus as we gathered our things. Let her, he replied. She just admitted in front of witnesses that she doesn't care about your father's well-being, only the money. That's going to destroy her in court. Aunt Linda touched my arm. Olivia, you did the right thing. But something gnawed at me. Vanessa had looked cornered, desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. I pulled out my phone and called the recovery facility. The receptionist answered on the third ring. Hi, this is Olivia Carson. I need to speak to someone about my father, Richard Carson. Has anyone visited him this morning? Let me check. A pause. Keyboard clicks. Yes, Ms. Carson Hughes was here about 30 minutes ago. My blood went cold. Is she still there? No, she left. Is everything all right? I need you to restrict all access to my father immediately. No visitors except me and his sister, Linda Harrison. Can you do that? I'll need authorization from... His power of attorney is under investigation for elder abuse, I said, my voice shaking. If something happens to him while she has access, your facility will be liable. Please, just lock it down until my attorney can file the paperwork. There was a long silence. Then, I'll notify the charge nurse. I hung up and looked at Marcus. We need to go there, now. We drove in tense silence, Marcus making calls to expedite an emergency guardianship petition, while Aunt Linda sat in the back seat, her face pale. When we arrived at the facility, I practically ran to the front desk. Richard Carson! I need to see him! The receptionist recognized me and nodded quickly. Room 302. The nurse is with him now. I took the stairs, my heart pounding. When I burst into Dad's room, I found Angela checking his vitals, her expression tight with worry. What happened? I demanded. Angela glanced toward the door, then lowered her voice. Your sister was here. She was agitated, demanding to see his medication chart. When I wouldn't give it to her without proper authorization, she got angry. Did she do anything to him? I don't know. I found her in here alone with him for about 5 minutes before I came back. He's more sedated than usual. I moved to Dad's side. He was slumped in his chair, eyes closed, breathing shallow. I touched his hand. It was limp, unresponsive. Dad, I said, my voice breaking. Dad, can you hear me? Nothing. When's his next scheduled medication? I asked Angela. Not for another 4 hours. But, she hesitated. His chart was updated this morning. New orders. Higher doses of sedatives. Who authorized that? The attending physician. But the request came through your sister. Chemical restraint through overmedication is often used to keep elderly individuals compliant and unable to communicate or resist. I felt sick. Can you reverse it? Can you reduce the dosage? I'd need a doctor's order, and it takes time for medication to clear his system. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Olivia, we need to move fast. I'm filing for emergency guardianship and a protective order, but it'll take at least 24 hours. She's trying to silence him, I said. She knows he can communicate. Barely, but enough. She's making sure he can't. Then we document everything, Marcus said. Medical records, witness statements, timeline. We're building a criminal case now, not just a civil one. If you're still here, you already know this isn't about inheritance. It's about survival. Subscribe. Because the way we set the final trap is the most satisfying part of the whole story. I stayed with Dad for the next hour, holding his hand, watching his chest rise and fall. Angela quietly pulled his recent medical records and made copies for us, a risk she was taking because she knew something was wrong. His medication regimen changed drastically 6 months ago, she said, showing me the chart. Antipsychotics, benzodiazepines, sedatives, none of which are standard for stroke recovery. This is chemical restraint. Why didn't anyone question it? Your sister presented it as palliative care. She said he was agitated, distressed, that the medications were for his comfort, and she had the legal authority to make those decisions. It was brilliant, in a horrifying way. Vanessa had used the system, the medications, the authority, the privacy protections, to trap Dad in his own body while she dismantled his life piece by piece. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd gotten sloppy. She'd shown her hand at the closing, admitted she didn't care about Dad's well-being. And now she was panicking. My phone buzzed. A text from Sandra, the private investigator. Check your email. Found something. I opened my email and read Sandra's message. She'd been monitoring Derek's financial activity and flagged something urgent. An hour ago, he'd made a large cash withdrawal, $15,000, from an ATM in Aventura. They're liquidating, I said to Marcus. They know the walls are closing in. Then we need to move faster, he said. I'll contact the state attorney's office. This is elder abuse, financial exploitation, possibly false imprisonment. They'll want to investigate. As we left Dad's room, I looked back at him one more time. He looked so small, so vulnerable. But I made him a silent promise. I was going to stop them. And I was going to make sure they never hurt anyone again. It took less than 48 hours for Vanessa to make her final mistake. Sandra called me at 11 a.m. on Thursday. She's on the move, Bal Harbour shops. High-end jeweler called Cartier & Company. She just walked in with a bag. What's in the bag? I'm guessing valuables. Your father's valuables? I was in the car within minutes, Marcus and Sandra meeting me in the parking garage. We watched from a distance as Vanessa emerged from the jeweler 20 minutes later, looking flustered. She was on her phone, arguing with someone, probably Derek. She's trying to liquidate, Sandra said. Classic move when a scheme falls apart. Grab what you can and run. We waited. Vanessa walked toward her car, a white Mercedes parked near the edge of the lot. That's when I saw him, Derek waiting by the passenger side, scanning the area nervously. Vanessa handed him something, a thick envelope. And that's when the police moved in. 2 unmarked cars blocked her exit. 4 officers stepped out, badges visible. One approached Vanessa's driver's side window. Vanessa Carson Hughes, we need you to step out of the vehicle. Vanessa's face went white. What? Why? I didn't do anything. Ma'am, step out of the vehicle now. Derek bolted. He made it maybe 10 steps before another officer tackled him in the middle of the parking lot. Shoppers stopped and stared. Phones came out. It was public, humiliating, and exactly what they deserved. I stepped out of Sandra's car and watched as the officer opened Vanessa's door and helped her out. Not gently. She was shaking, her designer bag slipping off her shoulder. "What is this about?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "Elder abuse, financial exploitation, and fraud," the lead detective said. "We have a warrant for your arrest. You have the right to remain silent." Vanessa's eyes found mine across the parking lot. For a moment, we just stared at each other, then her face twisted with rage. "This is your fault!" she screamed. "You ruined everything. We needed that money. Do you understand? We were going to lose everything." "So you stole from Dad instead," I said quietly. "He didn't need it. He's not even there anymore." The detective put a hand on Vanessa's arm. "Ma'am, anything you say can and will be used against you." But Vanessa was past listening. He couldn't speak. He couldn't think. What was the point? The money was just sitting there, wasting away, and we were drowning. "Enough," the detective said firmly, guiding her toward the patrol car. Derek, handcuffed on the ground, looked up at the officer standing over him. "I want a deal. I'll tell you everything. It was her idea. I just went along with it." And just like that, the partnership shattered. Derek, the man who'd pushed Vanessa into this, who'd scripted the "Dad is dead" phone call, who'd monitored the closing timeline and celebrated the big payday online, he flipped the second he faced real consequences. Within hours, Derek gave a full statement. He handed over text messages where he and Vanessa had planned the penthouse sale. Emails where they discussed, quote, keeping the old man quiet. Screenshots of Derek researching medication dosages and their sedative effects. The most damning evidence was a voice memo Vanessa had sent him 2 weeks earlier. "If we keep him on the meds, he won't be able to fight us. Just a few more weeks, and we're free." Chemical restraint, premeditated, documented in her own words. Marcus called me that evening with the update. The state attorney is moving forward with criminal charges. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, fraud, and unlawful restraint. Vanessa's looking at 5 to 10 years. Derek might get less if he cooperates fully, but he's not walking away clean. And Dad? The court granted you emergency guardianship this afternoon. You now have full authority over his medical care and finances. I'd recommend getting him evaluated by an independent neurologist immediately. I did exactly that. Within 72 hours, Dad was under new medical supervision. His medications were reviewed, adjusted, and in many cases, discontinued. The overmedication had been severe. Antipsychotics and sedatives, far beyond what any legitimate doctor would prescribe for stroke recovery. It took 2 weeks, but slowly Dad started coming back. His eyes cleared first, then small movements, his hand squeezing mine with real strength. And finally, one morning, a word, raspy, quiet, but unmistakable. "Olivia?" I cried. I sat beside his bed and held his hand and cried like I hadn't in years. "I'm here, Dad. You're safe now." He squeezed my hand again, harder this time, and I saw it in his eyes. Relief, gratitude, and something else. Recognition. He knew what I'd done. He knew I'd fought for him. Over the following months, Dad regained much of his speech and mobility. He'd never be exactly who he was before, but he was present. He was himself. We moved him into a smaller condo closer to me, somewhere he felt safe, somewhere Vanessa would never have access to again. The penthouse stayed in his name. Vanessa's power of attorney was revoked, and every stolen dollar was ordered repaid, though we all knew she'd never have the money. Aunt Linda visited twice a week. We played cards, watched old movies, talked about everything and nothing. One afternoon, Dad looked at me with clear eyes and said, "You didn't fight for money." "No," I said. "I fought for you." He nodded slowly. "That's the difference." Vanessa was sentenced to 8 years. Derek got 4 with probation. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to. Over-medication and financial exploitation of elderly individuals constitute serious criminal elder abuse. If you made it to the end, you're real. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next revenge story is even crazier. And comment this: should OP ever forgive the sister, or is she permanently cut off?